Right, so I propose to start this meeting now. So welcome everybody. This is the December meeting of the Central and East Planning Committee. I do need to give you some housekeeping rules just before we start the meeting. As in common with all the other county council meetings at the moment, these meetings are being transmitted live onto YouTube. They will be available to view for at least 6 months after this meeting date, I've been given to understand. The other housekeeping rules Michael's already mentioned, if we can remember to keep our microphones on mute, please. I can see a few people on the screen at the moment who aren't on mute. It does interfere with the quality of the recording. If you do wish to speak, and I will try to take everybody in order that they've indicated, could you use the chat function, please? And if possible, depending on whichever equipment you're using, if you can just type in RTS, which means right to speak. If you can't do that on your computer or iPad or whatever you've got, if you can just put the hand function. And Michael in the background will be just making sure that those are coming through, and that, you know, I do try to deal with everybody in order that they've indicated. Obviously, there are certain parts of the meeting where it isn't permissible to speak, and so, you know, we'll just leave you in the chat function at the time. Now we've got some buzzing there on the line. Right, so I will move over to the agenda now. And item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence.
Thanks, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillors Cochrane, Coult, Hawley, Lang and Robinson this morning.
Thank you, Michael. And do we have any substitute members in place of those?
Chair, we have Councillor Ivan Jewell substituting for Councillor John Robinson, and we have Councillor Lynn Pounder substituting for Councillor Audrey Lang.
Thank you, Michael. Item 3 on the agenda, minutes of the meeting which was held on the 10th of November, and they're pages 3 to 44 in the pack. Now, I don't intend to go through those page by page, so I would just like members who were present at that meeting, please, to indicate if they have any quick queries with the minutes or any items that they'd like to raise. So members
moving the minutes, Chairman.
Can I just ask who said that? Councillor Shuttle.
Yep, sorry, yeah.
Councillor Shuttle, you were present at that meeting, so thank you for that. Have we got a seconder for that?
I have formally seconded that, Chair. Thank you.
Right, okay, thank you, Councillor Paul Taylor. So those minutes have been accepted. Now, item 4 are declarations of interest. So if anybody has a declaration of interest they'd like to raise now, please. No, there's nobody indicating, but as usual, if you suddenly realise as we're going through the agenda that you may have a declaration you didn't realise, I'm sure there's, you know, you can flag that up at the time. Now, before we move on to item 5, which is really the nuts and bolts of the meeting, I'm going to go through some introductions. If we were in the council chamber, I would normally do this from my left-hand side. So I'll just go to the various officers in turn, and then the people who are party to the meeting will understand who these people are and what their function is. So if I imagine I'm sitting in the council chamber, over to my far right would be Martin Tyndale.
Morning, Chairman Committee. It's Martin Tyndall, Committee Services Officer. I'm taking the minutes for today's meeting.
And you also keep the speakers right with the timings as well, don't you, Martin, which is a very useful function. Thank you, Martin. And so then next I would have Neil, who is our legal representative. Neil.
Yes, morning, Chair. I'm Neil Carter. I'm the council solicitor.
Thank you, Neil. And then, of course, there's myself. And then over on to my left, we have Sarah.
Good morning, Chair. Sarah Eldridge, I'm the planning area team leader.
Thank you, Sarah. Then normally we would have whichever planning officer is presenting the particular presentation that we have. So now I'm going to move on to 5A on the agenda, which is a planning application, Glenmoor Farm, High Street in Low Pittington. And this is a variation of condition 2 of the planning approval to allow a change of materials from render to stone, with the glazed section above the entrance doors to increase of the roof line by 300 millimetres and a change in the land levels. and that's going to be presented by Planning Officer Lisa Marina. So Lisa, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just load my presentation. You can give me a few moments to do that. It's just opening now. It'll be hopefully be able to see it in a couple of moments. Okay. As Chair said, it's a property at Glenmoor Farm in High Street, Low Pickington. The application site, as edged in red, lies directly adjacent to but outside of the settlement boundary of Low Pickington. It is not within a conservation area or the green belt. It is located on Glenmoor Farm and was previously occupied by agricultural buildings constructed of brick and metal sheet roofs which housed poultry. To the south of the site is the farmhouse and the buyer of Glenmoor Farm, both of which are now residential dwellings. These dwellings are not owned or controlled by the applicant. The site extends to the east and occupies land behind two further dwellings on High Street. The residential curtilage of number 12 High Street creates the east boundary of the proposed site. The buildings and boundary at the Garth creates the west boundary of the proposed site, whilst to the north is open countryside. Since the first approval of this scheme, a further conversion has been approved to the west of the site. It's an aerial photo of the site. Again, the site is edged in red. A bit of background to the site. Consent was previously approved under planning application DM 16/03207 FPA, and this was for the erection of 2 dormer bungalows with attached double garages and associated landscaping. Since the first approval of this scheme, sorry, I've already mentioned that about the conversion to the west of the site. In respect of this application, it proposes variations to the existing 2016 scheme, which includes the increase in the height of the building by 300 millimetres, a change in material from render to stone, and also the regularisation of land levels across the site. The application is referred to the committee at the request of Councillor Bill Kellett in respect of impact on residential amenity. Some photos of the site now. This photo, as supplied by one of the objectors, shows the site as it was with the chicken sheds in existence. Development has already started on site, and this shows the site from the access road earlier on in the build. This photo shows the front elevation of the dwellings as work has progressed. This is a view of the front of the dwellings from the west of the site. The conversion can be seen in the photo to the left-hand side of the photo. This is a photo showing the relationship between the property which has consent for conversion and the gable wall of plot number 1 of the two plots. This photo shows the front of the properties to the left. To the right of the photo, you can just see the start of a wall, and that is the boundary wall of the site between the proposal and the properties of Glenmoor Farm, which were mentioned earlier on in my presentation. This photo is from the access road coming into the site. This actually shows the entrance into the buyer, which is the property which sits to the right-hand side of the wall. The development site is just to the left-hand side of the wall. So this was the previously approved front elevation of the dwellings. And this one shows the actual proposed scheme of the 2 dwellings. To the top is the proposed front elevation, and then there's a side elevation proposed as well. The changes, as previously shown, the top one is the previous approved elevation. The red line, which is shown on the bottom elevation, essentially shows where the 300 millimetre increase is being taken from. In respect of consultations, there's no objection raised from any statutory or internal consultees. In respect of public comments, we did receive 18 letters, some from the same dwellings due to reconsultation processes that have been carried out, citing various objections which are detailed within the report. In respect of planning considerations, these are preliminary matters which include the planning history of the site and previous decisions which have been detailed within the report. The principle of the development, this is considered acceptable when assessed against the policies of the County Durham plan. Also, the principle of residential has already been previously approved on the previous scheme. The visual impact on the amenity of the area, the changes are considered acceptable in respect of the impact on the visual amenity. In respect of residential amenity, while some separation distances are lacking which have been outlined in the report, it is considered that an improvement has been made from the previously approved scheme. Highway safety, no objections from highway safety, and any other issues. Just a couple of updates, Chair, to the report. The proposal was actually incorrect. It did miss out the change in land levels. Whilst that has been missed off an error on the report, the land levels issue has been discussed within the report. In respect of paragraph 10, which relates to previous site history, one of the applications from 1997 was refused, but that should also show that it was also dismissed on appeal. And in respect of paragraph 70 of the report, just a bit of clarification on this, the overall height increase is 300 millimetres. Whilst it does talk about additional height to the front and back, this relates to the usable height space that is being created internally, and it is not a 700 millimetre increase in height overall. It is only a 300 millimetre increase in height. Therefore, in conclusion, the impact upon the visual amenity of the area, as well as the impact on residential amenity, is considered to be acceptable, and the proposed changes are also considered to be acceptable as a variation to the previous scheme. The application is therefore considered to meet the requirements of the National Planning Policy Framework and relevant policies of the County Durham Plan. The objections and concerns raised have been taken into account and addressed within the report. However, it's not felt of sufficient weight to justify refusal of the application, given the previous consent which is in place and the fallback position which does occur. It is considered that officers have attempted to work with the applicants to achieve a better outcome for this development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that presentation, Lisa. So now we can go over to the list of speakers that we have for this item, so the committee can also consider what they have to say. And the first speaker that I have listed is the local member, Councillor Bill Kellett, who was previously mentioned, did call this application in. So Councillor Kellett, if you can start your presentation, please. I'm sure you'll be assisted by the officers with the various parts if you need to. So over to you, Councillor Kellett. Thank you.
Right, thanks a lot, Chair. We were going to put some photos on, or the residents have taken some, but we don't need to. I think the officers put on enough. And really, I think that's enough for me. As a local member, I've lived here for 43 years. Actually, in 9 days' time, I've lived here exactly 43 years. And I know the area and the farm better than anybody on this panel. I knew the old farmer, Willie Greenhow. In fact, him and my wife's relatives were good friends, and I often used to go to the farm. So I know the farm very, very well, and the poultry houses, which we all used to call them. I got contacted by Mr. Parkin to go up and have a look at the site from his house. And when I went up there, quite honestly, I was shocked because of the whole changes, which to me bore no relation to the original development plan. Now, if it had been just called in for a matter of about a foot, 12 inches, if you like, in height, no problems at all. I would have gone along with it, but it's not, Chair, it's not. With this one, over the years, bit by bit, it's been increased in height. So, for example, there's a nice slope to the north of the site. What's happened here? It's been built up with soil. So they've lifted the ground level, and I think Lisa's picked up already. but hasn't been included anywhere else, lifted by about 3 feet. So already that building's 3 foot higher than it was originally believed on the plans. In addition, there's another wall on top of that from where the building starts. So to start, we're not talking about 300 millimetres. We're talking about, in the region, I still talk old money, 6 feet, 2 metres. And it means the whole idea is that these houses are now overlooking the 2 properties immediately in front of them. Immediately. So straight away, there's a loss of amenity. Now, I'll continue on. There is also, when I was a city councillor, there was an application, not on this, exactly on this site, but near enough, it makes no difference. The 2 bungalows, they were refused, as officers mentioned, and it went to appeal, and the appeal was dismissed, so the bungalows weren't built. And yet, 20 years later, they got plan permission for these bungalows, and they're much, much bigger than the other ones. The application approved in 2016 was the 2 dormer bungalows with rooms and a roof. The current request to raise the roof height by the incorrect development of the site means that this development will be more in keeping with a 2-storey house. It's a 2-storey house, Chair. This is all it is. And it doesn't fit in with the surroundings. What you really need, photos, I'll be honest, I've lived here 40 odd years. They don't mean anything to me. You really need the site meeting for this one, just to see the magnitude of this building. They are huge. They're out of context with everything else around there. And bear in mind, Glenmore Farm itself won national awards for architecture and planning, and we're in some of these nice glossy magazines. And yet we've got these 2 here, which don't fit in with the surroundings. In addition, we've got another complication. There's already planned permission for the construction of another dwelling, not by the applicant, I might add, whereby the recommended facing distance between the properties which are being asked permission for and where we've got planned permission is only 9.7 metres, whereas the recommended one by the council law standards is 21 metres. In other words, the houses are that close together. And to complicate things still further, they're going to be overlooked. So what have they done to address this? There's a window in it. Well, you won't be able to see out the window. Why not? Because we're going to put glazed, which are going to be obscure, fixed obscure. How long is that going to last? You know, you get a change of owner. You'd expect obscure glass in a bathroom or a toilet, but nowhere else. If you get a change of owner, first thing you're going to say, what's that doing there? Let's put clear glass in. Straight away, you've got the beginnings of a neighbourhood dispute. Now, the committee has been asked to approve an application for an increase in the height of 2 dormer bungalows by 30 centimetres, about a foot, together with the application for a change in building materials. The applications expose the fact that buildings under construction bear absolutely no resemblance, and they don't, to anything for which original planning was granted. The buildings far exceed the size in floor and the height of what was permitted. The current application, quite candidly, is trying to legitimise what has happened by the backdoor method. It's happened. It's already been lifted up. As I said, if you went there, I saw it straight away. That's not the real level. Man, I used to go up to hen, well, I still call them hen crews, when they had hens up there in the battery cages. And I can tell you, it's been lifted. It's not the correct level. And what I'm saying, I mean, obviously, it's up to the planners and I can't vote, but I'm asking that we're getting adjournment and that really the applicant should resubmit and ask for retrospective planning permission for something which is actually being built. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kellett. Lisa, would you prefer to answer some of those queries at this point, or should we move on with the other speakers and then come back when you've got more queries on the table?
I'll answer later on, thanks, Chair.
Right, okay, thank you.
Chair, before we move on, can we just mention Councillor Kellett did have a video as well. I wonder whether he would like us to play that in view of the fact that members haven't been able to visit the site, whether he feels that would be useful. That's what's been sent in to accompany his presentation.
Yes, I'll try and comment. I wasn't aware you had a video, but if you do, because I know the area, yeah, I feel quite comfortable with that.
Thank you, Sarah. I think that'll assist the planning committee.
I'll just bring that up now, Chair.
Okay.
And there's already seen this aerial shot. This looks like a development before any work was done. And at the bottom, this is the architectural winning award site, the Glenmore Farm. As I said, was one of some of these glossy magazines, Homes and Gardens, this sort of thing. Very nice construction, that.
I'm not sure about anybody else, but this video isn't moving.
It is moving for me, Chair. Is it showing?
I've clicked on the arrow that was on my screen now, and it started to move now. So I don't know if anybody else has been sitting under the same. I was expecting it moving automatically.
That just looked like a photo to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if members can click on the arrow in the middle.
Do you want me to start it from the beginning, Chair?
I think that might be an idea, Lisa, because other people might have been under the same impression as me that it was going to be done remotely anyway.
Okay, it's starting now, Chair.
Right, thank you.
This is just the site as it is at present.
So the ground floor.
Again, you can see the lintels. That shows just the window head height. Yep. And you can actually see how high the scaffolding is to actually.
I think the effect of where the gradient is, you can see the way the walls step down.
The scaffolding on the right hand side.
I think it would be a split level bungalow. This would have overcome this. This is taken from Glenmore Farm. You can see on this at the bottom of the building how it's been lifted up to land, but it looks like wedge shaped. Soil levels aren't what they were originally when I knew this site.
Which is another reason why the bike's not there, you know, it's like,
This is the Glenmoor Farm itself, which won the architectural award.
That's the video finished, Chair.
Thank you, Lisa. So if we can remove that from the screen now, please. Thank you for that, Councillor Kellett. I think that does give members, you know, a little bit more of an idea of the actual site. We'll move on now to the next registered speaker, who is Mr. Christopher Fish. And Mr. Fish, you have 5 minutes to speak, and Martin, as I mentioned previously, will sort of indicate as you get near to the end of your time if you need to take the 5 minutes.
Thank you,
so,
Chair.
Mr. Fish, can you take yourself off mute now and address the meeting, please?
I think I have. Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me all right?
Well, I certainly can.
Thank you. Okay. Right. Consent for the houses was given by officers in 2016 following many years of refusals and lost appeals. This approval envisaged a replacement of the small single-storey sheds, photograph 1 if you have that please, with residential properties of a similar scale and form which were intended for a local long-term resident. Key attributes of the original scheme were its low-lying character and the way in which the houses remained subservient to Glenmoor Farm. The original approval described the scheme as follows. The bungalows would be similar to the footprint of the existing buildings, and the eaves and ridge heights will be kept low so the proposed dwellings appear subservient to the principal dwellings. The proposed development will be of a scale and massing not dissimilar to that of the development that exists. It is our view that the original application was substantially deficient in information and its consideration was flawed, leading to the significant issues arising today. This flawed decision will be examined in the event of any ombudsman case or potential judicial review. Present construction has continued at great speed despite not being in accordance with any approved plan and therefore being unauthorised. Although this is an application for a minor variation, the developers are seeking authorisation and acceptance of their unauthorised works which have not been considered by the council or officers. These works are now very far from the form intended by the approval, and it's pertinent to underline the difference between the expectation of the approved development and the actual construction. This change should require a full planning application as it raises significant issues not assessed in the original permission. The current development by a commercial developer seeks to maximise the scale of the buildings and their presence in their landscape and to challenge the established prominence of the buildings which front onto High Street. The buildings are no longer the modest bungalows approved, but are very substantial two-storey houses of around 8,000 square feet at 750 square metres. The footprint and form of the original structures has been completely swallowed by these large properties, and to compound the issue of dominating the area, the new property at the West End has been raised by almost 2 metres above the original ground level. Photo 2, please. Had the new properties been constructed in accordance with the approved plans, the levels of the original buildings and to their original scale, they would have remained below the height of the boundary wall to the Byre and Glenmoor Farm. Now, the new first floor bedrooms afford an uninterrupted view into the private rear gardens of these two properties. The original award-winning Glenmoor Farm development sought to sympathetically respond to its setting and neighbours. To create light, open living areas, large areas of glazing were included on the rear. These now afford an open view straight into the houses from the elevated first floor bedroom windows of the new buildings, in conflict with the council's policies on privacy and residential amenities. The scheme also fails to meet the privacy distance standards as outlined on the officer's report, which is another deficiency of the original approval exacerbated by the current development. While it is true that these standards are guidance and can be applied flexibly, surely the reduction of facing distances from 21 metres, 68 feet, to 9.5 metres, 31 feet, is stretching flexibility rather too far. The applicant has stated there has been a cut and fill construction method employed on the site and that this has reduced the levels of the buildings. Another significant deficiency of the earlier approval was the failure by officers to control site levels on this sloping site. The alleged minimal cut at the east end of the site is far outweighed by the fill at the west end, which is now retained by a 1.5 metre high retaining dead wall on top of approximately 0.5 metre of built up ground level. Photograph 3, please. On top of this, the applicant is proposing to further increase the height of the houses,
1 minute
resulting in a
remaining.
brick wall now in excess of 5 metres in height, which dominates the adjacent site, severely impacting on it and severely compromising the approved development. The full impact and scale and form of the unauthorised raising in levels cannot possibly be appreciated in photographs and should not be judged by a single person's interpretation of the issues, and it's strongly suggested that a decision is delayed at least until members have an opportunity to make individual site visits in which the current structures can be compared to photographs of the previous buildings, which they are supposed to, in the words of the approval, more or less replicate. It's requested the current application is refused. However, if it is approved, the proposed conditions are considered unacceptable as they give far too much leniency for the continuation of the construction at early hours in the morning, and the suggestion that a construction plan is submitted within 8 weeks would be pointless given the speed of building on site and the disturbances from noise, dust and unsociable working hours.
Time's elapsed, Chair.
Mr. Fish, did you have much more to say on the points?
I have finished there, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would have allowed you to go a little bit over, but thank you for that. We do also have 2 registered speakers in support of this development. Now we have Mr. Joe Ridgeon, who I believe is the agent, and Mr. Richard Scorer, who is the applicant. And between you two gentlemen, you have 5 minutes in which to speak. So could you indicate who intends to speak, please, and who would like to go first?
Morning, Chair. Richard Scorer is going to speak and present his scheme, and I'll pick up any questions at the end of it, if that's okay, Chair.
Right, thank you, Mr. Ridgeon. So, Mr. Scorer, over to you. And as I mentioned, you have 5 minutes between you, so we will be keeping an eye on the time to guide you with that. So, Mr. Scorer. Do we still have a connection with Mr. Scorer? Can somebody check that?
We do, Chair, but he's currently on mute.
Right.
Is that better?
Yes.
Can you hear us now?
Yes, we certainly can, Mr. Scorer. So over to you. Thank you.
Right. I would like to thank you, first of all, for allowing me to put my case forward. As you know, my name is Richard Scorer, and my son Luke and I were presented with the opportunity to buy a parcel of land with full planning permission granted to build 2 dormer bungalows on part of the former Glenmoor site at Lower Pittington approximately 14 months ago. We have a family building business and have carried out groundworks for over 15 years for many national house builders. Both Luke and myself have sold our family homes to start building, as it was something we have always aspired to. As builders, we know that render starts looking scruffy after only a couple of years. We wanted to use high quality reclaimed materials that fit into the character of the area and can be something that we could be proud of. All of the brick and stone we have sourced from local areas.
Mr. Scorer, I just got to point out part of what you're saying. It's coming and going. I don't know whether you're moving your head away from the microphone, and I'd like the committee to hear everything that you'd like to say.
Right. I'll start the last paragraph again, then, if you don't mind. As builders, we know that render starts to look scruffy after only a couple of years. We wanted to use high quality reclaimed materials that fit into the character of the area and be something that we can be proud of. All of the brick and stone we have used so far is reclaimed and has come from nearby sites, which means our homes will definitely be in keeping with the character of the area. Again, we completely agree with the planning officer's views that the use of stone instead of render will last longer and be more sustainable. On commencing groundworks and working out levels with profiles and a laser, it soon became apparent that the top bungalow would need to be sunk into the ground by approximately 1,350 millimetres. And then the garage stepping down by a further 150 millimetres. That's the top bungalow. We then worked on approximately a 950 millimetre step in between bungalow floor levels and a further reduction of the bottom bungalow garage by a further 300 millimetres. To keep the outside levels low, we have commenced building from the foundation with bricks as opposed to blocks. This is to keep the outside levels as low as we can. The original planning permission stated that the build should start from existing ground levels. However, we have gone beyond this by carrying out a cut to the footprint of both buildings to keep them low. My son Luke is 6'7" tall, and the original approved plans had the upstairs rooms right into the eaves of the building. Understandably, we wanted to raise the height of the roofs so that we could use more of the room without having to duck down. The increase of 300 millimetres shouldn't even be noticeable if you were stood outside of the house, and we completely agree with the planning officer's view in the committee report that the increase in height will have a minimal impact on the wider character of the area. When we bought the site, we didn't know about any possible issues with separation distance between our new houses and the potential house to be built at the rear of the buyer. We are as frustrated as the objectors that the council appears to have mistakenly overlooked the extant permission from circa 1998. We didn't really want a house that close. However, we have accepted the proposed build and have agreed with planners to fit obscure glazing, which we would want anywhere.
1 minute remaining.
If there was to be a house that close. With this change to the plans, this should be acceptable for both us and any future residents in this house, if ever built. Following all of the objections from neighbours, we have worked with the council and provided all of the information that has been requested from us, including extra surveys to confirm existing levels and additional plans. We respectfully request that the members approve the application subject to the proposed planning conditions, which will allow us to get on and finish our homes, which have already been delayed by 4 months due to planning delays. I am more than happy to answer any questions. If there are any technical planning questions, Mr. Joe Ridgeon will be able to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Scorer. Martin, our timekeeper, are we out of time with that?
We've just finished the 5 minutes as he finished his presentation.
Right, so thank you, Martin. Well, unfortunately, Mr. Scorer, we don't have time for Mr. Ridgeon to come in. I think we need to be absolutely fair to everybody, and Mr. Fish didn't go over his time either. I'm now going to come back to Lisa. Lisa, do you want to pick up any points and give any further information or explanation?
Yeah, just a couple of points, Chair. In respect of the obscure glazing, members will note that condition 6 of the approval does state that the obscure glazing has to remain in perpetuity. So even if it was a change in owner and somebody else owned the property, that condition would still apply. And if that ever was taken out, it would be a breach of condition, and we would be able to investigate and look into that further. Also, in respect of comments regarding regularisation of the works and a full application being submitted, I mean, this variation of condition does seek to look at the variations of the previously approved scheme, and we do feel that is an acceptable way of dealing with the changes that are proposed. And in terms of the operation hours, they are standard hours that are set, therefore we don't feel they are unreasonable in respect of the working hours condition. I think that's about it. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Lisa, thank you for that. So committee, we now go over to yourselves, and as I mentioned before, if anybody would like to speak, if you can use the RTS in the chat function, please, or failing that, if your equipment doesn't allow you to do that, indicate with the hand. Somebody has indicated to speak. Oh, I've just come out of the meeting. Councillor Shuttleworth, you would like to speak.
Yeah, I keep saying in these meetings that we should always take note of the local member. And Councillor Keller spoke quite passionately about being there 43 years next week, and you know what the chicken huts were like. Those properties don't resemble anything like the footprint of that. And I think we need to look at this pretty carefully before we. I know it's been approved in the past, but I mean these buildings don't resemble anything like what was there.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Shuttleworth. I know Councillor Taylor, you're waiting to speak, but Sarah has indicated she'd like to speak, so I'm going to bring Sarah in first, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, that for members that we consider there is a fallback position in the 2016 Planning Permission for 2 dwellings. So our view is that the development could still proceed on the basis of that 2016 planning permission. Will require a bit of amendment, but there is an existing fallback position. So the slide that Lisa had as part of her presentation that had the existing and the proposed dwellings, members should be mindful of in terms of an established fallback position that can be implemented.
What does that actually mean, Sarah? Can you elaborate on when you've said there's a fallback position? Just to make sure
sorry, Chair.
What you're talking about.
Perhaps to explain it a bit clearer, there is a planning permission for 2 dwellings on the site. So that 2016 planning permission has been started and can be finished, basically. So the fallback position being the developer could continue to implement or could implement a planning permission for 2 dwellings. And note what the objector has said about the resemblance to the chicken sheds, but I think at this stage that's a moot point because the comparison does need to be against the planning permission for the 2 dwellings that exists.
Right, thank you for that, Sarah. So Councillor Taylor, you've been very patient. I'll come over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Paul Taylor, representing the people of Brandon Division. I read this report a couple of times last night, as I guess as we all did, and thought it was pretty straightforward. It's certainly within the scope of Section 73, it seemed to me. And I was just going to say what Sarah said there regarding the 216 permission. But I don't know about other members, but this is rather confusing. We have our excellent planning officer telling us this does meet the agreed build, and then we hear from Mr. Fisher tells us that it bears no comparison. Who's right? You know, what there's talk of 1.5 meters, 2 meters, and then obviously we're told 300 millimeters. Who's right here? Where's building control at in all of this, Chair? If we can have this clarified before we go any further, because there's such a disparity, there's such a difference in what people are saying. I mean, a massive difference, 1.5 to 2 meters to 30 centimeters. Who's right? Thanks.
I understand your frustration, Councillor Taylor, and actually I have a question very unusually and actually I would like to put the question. I don't know whether our planning officer can answer it or whether we need to go back to the applicant. But I would just like to know who actually raised the level of the ground. Was that ground at that level when the applicant bought the site, or who has raised the level of the ground to what it is now? Because what it seems to me is the crux of this issue is that we're starting from a different ground level. So I just would wonder who it was who raised the level of the ground in the first place. So Lisa, do you know that, or do we need to go back to Mr. Scorer?
Chair, perhaps if I can come in. I think as Mr. Scorer started to outline in his presentation, once they acquired the site and got onto the site, it was apparent to them that there was a slope across the site. So the planning permission that they had that effectively indicated a completely level site would always need something happening with it to actually be able to accommodate a flat development. There would always be some variation in levels, which they've achieved through a cut at one end and a fill at the other. So I believe it was Mr. Scorer, but I wonder if perhaps Mr. Ridgeon or Mr. Storer would just like to confirm that for the committee.
Mr. Ridgeon, perhaps you'd like to come in. You've not spoken yet.
Yes, I can explain that. I think where the issue is that the objectives are looking at it from the western end, but really the site needs to be considered across the piece. So starting at the eastern end, Richie cut into the site 1.5 metres, created a level development platform, stepped it down again, created another development platform, and just to Mr. Fish said it was 1.5 metres. That's incorrect. It's raised by 66 centimetres. Paragraph 67 of the committee report states that, and indeed we measured that on site together with the planning officer. The other point to note is that at that western end, it's actually only single story. So in terms of that upbuild of underbuild of 65 centimetres, and then you've got a single story garage on top of that. So the way that Mr. Fish presented it was incorrect in that regard. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Mr. Ridge, and that does put a little bit more information on the table. Councillor Taylor, do you feel you've had your question answered as regards the levels?
I feel I'm probably not qualified to speak on this. What I want to know, I want to simplify this for us. We're judging this on the application. Is this compliant with what has been approved? That's my question. Or is it higher in places where it shouldn't be? Just to try and simplify it for me as a layman, I'm not a builder. Is this in compliance with what has been approved?
So over to our planners. Sarah, I think are you indicating that you'd like to speak?
Yes, I will, Chair. Thank you. I think the straight answer for Councillor Taylor is no. However, this application seeks to regularise that position. So I think the build, as members have seen it in terms of the photographs, that's what we're asking members to consider to be acceptable. I think we would agree that there is some variation from that 2016 application, hence the need for this application that's before members today.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. I'll move on now to Councillor Ivan Jewell.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ivan Jewell, member for Burnopfield and Dipton Division. My question was very similar to what Councillor Taylor has just asked, and that was in line with compliance. My concern here is that what we're asked to do is we're asked to consider this amendment that's been put before us. But what seems to be pulled into the issue is former planning application and the approval of the former planning application. I would like, maybe could we have some legal advice here where we stand on this one? Normally we'd be sticking solely to what was in front of us. What we seem to be doing here is we're reverting to a past application. I just wonder how we stand legally on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jewell. Neil, do you feel that's something that you can comment on?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I think the issue with the land levels sort of boils down to this. Members need to come to a view on the acceptability of the land levels as they exist now. That's the application that's before you. The planning officer's already explained that there's some variation to the 2016 permission in that regard. So the one of the aims of this application is to essentially fix that issue or regularise it. So members just need to decide whether the land levels are acceptable as they're presented now. The planning officers also mentioned the fallback position. That's sort of relevant in terms of the principle of the development. So we've heard from some of the objectors who said it doesn't resemble what was previously there. But if there's an extant planning permission from 2016, as the planning officers said, the comparison to be made is not what was previously there, but what was permitted in 2016. And what are the changes to that, and are those changes acceptable?
Thank you, Neil. So that does clarify that we really are only looking at the changes that have been submitted in this application, which differ from the one that was granted in 2016. So we just need to focus on those and whether we feel that those are acceptable. And we've heard from objectors and supporters in that matter. Is there anybody else on the committee who would like to speak, please? Councillor Davidson.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry about the delay in trying to type RTS. It was trying to say rats like it always does for David. Yeah. My thing is, what's always my thing, to be fair, we've got somebody building some houses that are right next to some other houses, and yet we've still got a construction management plan that says they can start at 7:30 in the morning. If somebody was starting to build something, which I think it was 19 meters, wasn't it, the separation distance? If somebody's building something 19 meters away from my property and they're starting at 7:30 in the morning, I'll be wanting to be hitting them with something large. So I'm wondering if we can have a look at that and be a bit more sensible and perhaps give them an extra half an hour, which is what I think we used to do in the old days before these new hours of working came in. So I'm wondering if we can give them a little bit more time on that, please, Chair. The other thing that I was wondering about was oh, sorry, Sarah, I saw you came on and then went off again. The other thing I was wondering about was all the objectors mentioned the separation distances. It'd be 19 meters instead of 21, but I take it that was in the original plans, but that hasn't really come out. So I'm just asking, was that in the original application? Thanks, Chair.
Right, that you've got 2 points there. Now, the first point about the construction management plan wouldn't come into play until we've made a decision about the application. But the second point, yes, is very relevant at this part in the discussion. So Lisa, could you answer that, please?
Yes, Chair. Essentially, there's the separation distances proposed on the dwellings to the existing dwellings are sufficient. They do meet the 21 metres. Where the deficiencies come into play is on an extant consent, which is from quite a long time ago, which essentially allows a dwelling to be constructed off the back of the buyer, which is one of the properties in front of the development site. That actually takes if that property was to be constructed, a window would be located on essentially the boundary wall, which I showed on one of my plans, which was the large boundary wall that sits between the development site and the neighbours. The separation distance for that would actually be 9.7 metres. So that is significantly below the 21 metres. That was, however, approved under the previous 2016 application. What we have attempted to do is to try and improve those separation distances, and that is by the inclusion of the obscure glazing condition for the window. Essentially, that would result in separation distances having to be less, because there is not a direct window-to-window view of clear glazing to clear glazing. And so we have attempted to improve the situation from the 2016 application by including the obscure glazing condition.
Thank you, Lisa. So I think the short answer is there isn't actually a building there at the moment.
No, there isn't.
Chair, can I come back in and ask another question? It's probably, you might say it's not relevant, but do we not have a thing where it says you've got to start within 3 years or you need to put a new planning application in? And yes. In that case, would they not have to put a new planning application in? And because this building's now there, then they would have to move theirs further away. I'm just wondering, thanks.
Yeah, in respect of this application, it was as part of a wider scheme, so it included the conversion of the two dwellings which are currently in front. That was one property, and it included the conversion of those to two separate dwellings, which was carried out. Therefore, that permission remains live. So the permission for that new dwelling remains live because the original scheme was implemented. Therefore, they are still able to implement that scheme at some point if they wish.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm pleased that you raised that question, Councillor Davidson, because I'm quite sure that there will be other members on the committee who were that same thought was running through their minds actually. But that is the vagaries of the plan, and because the larger scheme had already been started, it's still in operation, although it hasn't been implemented. So we have Councillor Ivan Jewell.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like some clarification. I noticed within the objections, access was brought up, and the objector suggested that the access was only suitable for five properties or 5 properties, and there would be 6 there now. Could we clarify that, please?
Lisa, is that back to you?
Chair, can I come in this one? John McGargill, Highway Development.
Do you feel it's more appropriate for John to answer, Lisa? Thank you. Yes, John, if you'd like to come in now.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, within the County Council's residential design guide, it does actually stipulate that residential developments with more than 5 properties should be served with an adopted highway. This development will have 7 properties, I think. Certainly it won't be provided with an adopted highway. However, it is a muse type development. And the reason we have that guidance within our design guide is to address a few issues. First of all, public utilities, provision of public utilities. Public utilities prefer to be in an adopted highway, so they're unencumbered when laying their services. The development would need to be served by a private connection from the public utilities in the development. That's quite normal for muse type developments, so there's nothing different there. Street lighting in private streets can be an issue if you have more than 5 properties within a street, but within a muse type development doesn't become such an issue. And also maintenance of private streets, and again, where it's a street rather than a muse type development becomes an issue. Overall, Chair, none of these would impact upon the safe use of the development by vehicular traffic. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much for that clarification, John, and thank you, Chair, for allowing the question.
No, thank you for raising it, Councillor Jewell. So other members of the committee, is anybody still sitting with something that's puzzling them? They would like a question answered, or is anybody at the point where they would like to raise a motion on the application? Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's a difficult one. Let's be honest about this with ourselves. It is difficult. You feel for the applicants. Perhaps they should have done more homework when they bought the land to see how the lay of the land was. And then, of course, you feel for the people living nearby. Something is being built, which is not exactly what they told was going to be built. It is different. And I guess you could say significantly in some ways. It's not just the 30 millimeters, 300 millimeters, 30 centimeters. So I see both sides of this. But in planning, what we've got to do is assess this on its own merits. And also, we have to be seen to be reasonable as well in our adjudication when we come to a decision on this. So are we being unreasonable by saying, hey, this isn't exactly, and we don't feel it's within the scope of Section 73 of the county, it is the Town and Country Planning Act. We've got too many planning acts at this moment in time, too many plans. Is it within the scope of Section 73? I tend to think it may well be now, giving it thought and listening to both sides of the argument. But I still do feel very, very much for the people that are going to be living next to this new application, to this new building. So I am a little torn. So it is with reluctance that I will move acceptance of the officer's recommendation on this, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I think you've echoed what probably a lot of the committee are feeling. Councillor Shuttleworth, you've indicated you'd like to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just in relation to the heights, I mean, if these properties are infinitely higher than what they should have been, is it fair to say they'll be overpowering the properties around about there? Can somebody answer that question?
Well, I think we've got to establish first, are they considered to be infinitely higher? I'm wondering who best to go to here, and I'm going to go to you, Lisa, first. Perhaps Sarah, you want to join in.
On this proposed application, the height is only 300 millimetres higher than what was previously approved on the 2016 application. So it is only a 300mm difference. There may be, different people may consider the difference in height to what was originally there on the site, but in respect of the two applications, the 2016 and this one, there was a 300mm difference in height.
Is it fair to say that the ground has been made up to be higher than what it was in the beginning?
I think to clarify, there's been cut and fill across the whole site. So at the eastern end, the ground level's been reduced, and at the western end, it's been increased to give the developer a level platform to be able to build the house up effectively.
I think I'll add to that as well, Sarah. That was probably the question that I asked Councillor Shuttleworth earlier on, and the thing being that we saw those photographs which were quite clearly taken from the end, which had been raised up. We didn't really have, unless, through the presentation, the other side where it had been chipped into the slope to make the ground level. And as Lisa's clarified, actually it's 300mm is the actual rise in this application. Does that help?
Sorry, not really. I mean, obviously we can't have a site visit. It would have been helpful if we had, but looking at those photos, it looked as if it was infinitely higher, as in made up. So therefore, the question is, are those properties going to be overpowering the people around about there?
Chair, can I come in?
I'm sorry, Councillor Kellett, no, you can't. This is between the committee and the officers at this moment in time, and I think that's a subjective question, to be perfectly honest, but I will go back to the planners and perhaps our legal representative for somebody who can add something.
I wonder whether it's worth Lisa getting her presentation up again, just so that members can see the sort of the surrounding context. The property to the west is relatively low profile. It's single story. It has Velux roof lights. The properties to the south, I believe, are all sort of full, true 2-story dwellings. So we're somewhere in the middle here. What you might term sort of story and a half. So a dwelling with the first floor accommodation provided in that roof space with dormers.
I think you can see there on those pictures, that last one there, Lisa, at the top end, that ground's had to be dug into to start those being level, and it does drop down a little bit to this end, which is probably where it's had to be raised up slightly to make them more of a level. And then there were some more later on in the presentation where we could see the plans.
You can see, Chair, that the line is shown where the original land level, where the land level would have been to the right hand side of the photo, and then you show that it comes down from there.
Mm-hmm. So where on that photo, Lisa, is the 30 centimetre 300mm difference? Which end?
I'll go to another photo, Chair. And you on this photo, you've got the original scheme on top, and the other scheme, the proposed scheme underneath. And if you can see my red line, that is where the increase comes from. So the 300mm increase is between essentially the eaves and the windows at ground floor. So that's where the raise in the height will come, and that allows them to do the internal alterations for finished floor and ceiling levels to get what they need internally.
Right, so that isn't on the whole development, that's only on that particular property. Those garages to the left, they remain the same height.
Both properties are the same, so the 300mm increase on height is for both properties.
Right.
Lisa, do you have the side elevation in your presentation?
Yes. To the bottom there, Sarah.
The 65 millimetres that Mr. Ridgen referenced, so on the property on the left-hand side, the slightly lower one, the 65 millimetres is effectively from where the floor level of the garage would be. There's effectively a 65 centimetre piece of wall below floor level that goes into the ground. So there's sort of a dead wall that's 65 centimetres before the floor level of that end property.
I think you can see to the top right hand side how that's been levelled off, that particular slope. Yeah. So I'll go back to Councillor Shuttleworth. Does that give you any clearer picture of where these the rise?
Well, no, I mean, I was looking at that video that we had. Looking at the video, it looked substantially built up compared to where it was.
Yeah, I think that's the difficulty of looking at information that's been supplied.
So can I ask, is the privacy of the people round about there compromised by virtue of what's been done there and allowing these heights? Because if it's been raised, if the ground's been raised up, surely if you raise it even more, is that intruding onto the people next door? I mean, I don't know the area, you know.
I think that's their argument. I think that's part of their argument. They feel that it does. We are charged with looking at this application in front of us to decide whether we go along with the officer's decision to approve those amendments or not.
Okay, thanks.
Now we have had from Councillor Taylor, we've had a motion to approve this application. Does anybody else would anybody else feel they'd like to second that motion, or does anybody else have anything different to put on the table? Councillor Davidson.
Thanks, Chair. I'm tempted to second Councillor Taylor's motion, but first I want a discussion to see if we can get the condition about the working hours altered, because I like to say I don't think it's fair that you've got people who are not very far away who's got all this going on at 7:30 in the morning. So can we have a discussion about that, and if we can change it, then I'm happy to second Councillor Taylor's motion. Thank you.
So, seeing as how it was you that raised that the last time, what exactly is it you're proposing to be considered then? You mentioned 8 AM as opposed to...
Yeah, I just want to try and get it, try and get half an hour less each day for the people to, because I think that 8 AM's a bit more palatable than 7:30 AM, Chair, so I'd like to see if we can get a change to that, please.
And the same days of operation?
Yeah, I think the days of operation are fine, because you expect them to be getting on with the work. Also, the other thing is that we need to keep the days of operation the same, because the place looks a bit of a mess now. So the faster they can get the work done, the faster they'll get rid of all that mud and stuff. So, but it's just the first thing right early in the morning that's that I don't like, Chair. Thank you.
Over to Lisa and Sarah. Would that be something that we could consider?
Yes, Chair, if members wish to change that condition, then that's not an issue. We can change that condition.
Right, okay. So I'll come back to you, Councillor Davidson, because you have indicated that you would second that motion. Are you still...
I'll second it, Chair.
Right, so we have a mover and a seconder. We do have Councillor Taylor wanting to come back in to speak, and Councillor Ivan Gill. So Councillor Taylor, I'll come back to you.
Yes, Chair, I was just going to clarify that I'd formally move the officer's recommendation, adding the condition that work doesn't start till 8 in the morning, to be fair to the people who live in close proximity. I don't think it's a big ask, an extra 30 minutes, and Mark is his usual sensible self and, shall we say, down to earth and quotes real life. I think 8 AM is soon enough, and thanks for that, Mark, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Taylor, I'll just come to you to finish this off.
Yes, that's fine. I just need to say, I mean, I think there are no sort of real winners in this situation. It's a very difficult situation. And what I always do in planning terms is I look at it and see if we can come up with a reason, a valid reason for refusal or approval. I think I'm struggling here to come up with a reason that I could put forward for refusal. I thank Councillor Davidson for his comment. I mean, I don't think it's something that I think it's something that is worthwhile doing. Although in planning terms, I don't think it's a deal breaker. I think it makes it better for residents around. But as he says, the less hours of working that you have, the longer the development will take. So there's sort of this balances here. So thanks very much for that.
No, thank you, Councillor Jewell. I do like to give everybody an opportunity to speak. So committee, we will now go to the vote. I don't have any opposing motions being indicated. So we'll go to the vote, and Neil Carter, if you can just explain how that will take place, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So what I'll do is I'll come to each member and ask if they're for or against. Equally, if any member wants to abstain, if you can just let me know at that stage. So I'll take the vote, and that is for the motion to approve the application in accordance with the officer's recommendation, subject to an amended condition 5 to change the start time from 7:30 to 8 a.m. So I'll start with Councillor Brown. Are you for or against?
For the motion, for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Corrigan?
For approval.
Thank you. Councillor Davidson?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Freeman?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Iveson?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jewell?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Manchester?
For.
Councillor Pounder?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Shuttleworth?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor?
For. Thank you.
Chair, that's 9 votes to 1 in favour.
Thank you, Neil. So committee, that means that planning application, the amendments to the planning application have been approved. So I thank everybody for their contributions to the discussion this morning. So we will now move over to item 5B on the agenda this morning, which is concerning William Robson House in the Clay Path in Durham, and this is an extension and conversion of the multi-level decked car park to form 3 2-bedroomed apartments and 4 2-bedroom townhouses. And Paul Hopper, our planning officer, will take us through this presentation. Over to you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I will just quickly, hopefully quickly, load up the presentation, and so it should be there with you shortly. Chair, can you see that, Chair?
I can see that.
Excellent. I will assume that everyone else can as well, and make a start. So as Chair explained there, this application relates to land and buildings at William Robson House, proposes the creation of 3 2-bed apartments and 4 2-bed townhouses for extension and conversion of existing buildings, and those would be occupied as C3 accommodation. It represents the most recent of a series of applications and associated appeals at the site, which sought residential use in various guises across the site, and follows detailed discussions with the local planning authority. So this slide shows the position of the application site to the east of Durham city centre, to the south of Clay Path. And members may recall the site was visited by committee in association with the previous planning application in 2019. So this satellite imagery shows the site in greater context, from which you can see Lees's Bowl to the south of the application site, Clay Path to the north, with Millennium Square at slightly further distance to the west. So this slide shows the view of the site looking north from Lees's Bowl roundabout, traffic lights as they are, from which you can see the gable elevation of William Robson House to the left of the coppice of existing trees. Members will also be able to see the right hand side of that the nearest residential properties of Blue Court Court. So this photograph shows the site entrance from Clay Path, and it's the sole means of access to the site, which also served the previous office use of William Robson House itself, and the car park was occupied in association with that use. So this slide shows the site access looking in the opposite direction towards Claypath from within the site, and from which members will be able to see William Robson House on the left-hand side and some of the external car parking just in shot there to the right-hand side. So this slide shows the existing car park in the centre of the slide, and that's now protected by security fencing, which wasn't there when the car park was in use, and has been erected to prevent certain elements of unauthorised use. Members will also be able to probably just pick out on the left-hand side of the photograph the roof of the nearest residential dwelling at Bluecoat Court, and that's just at the left-hand side of the car park. Now you might be able to see it behind the stone wall. Members will also see the cluster of trees extending beyond the roof of the car park in the background there. So this slide shows the view from the closest residential property that I mentioned a moment ago, and it's a property at Bluecoat Court. It's situated sort of immediately adjacent to the boundary with the application site. You can see that just about the front door on the left-hand side of the photograph, and the roof you can see behind that dwarf wall is the existing car park. So this slide shows the view from the centre of the court, and members will be able to see the residential property in better context to the left-hand side of the photograph there, and just on the right-hand side of the slide above the blue car there is the properties on the other side of the court. So later in the presentation I've aligned this photograph alongside the proposed elevations, so members will be able to get an appreciation of how the development might occupy that space behind the stone wall to the centre of the photograph there. So this is the last of the photographs that we have, and it shows the site looking south from the access to Bluecoat Court. So you can see again that nearest residential property to the left-hand side of the car park, and this is the main access to the court, which then returns around to the left-hand side, and there are about 4 or 5 properties situated around that court. And you can see the roof of the car park just peering over the stone wall, and members will probably be able to pick out the cathedral in the background there through the mist. So this slide shows the roof plan and section detail for the townhouses, and shows the twin ridge dual pitched arrangement, which I've described it in the report. This slide shows that a little better, and it's important to understand the arrangement in as much as how natural light would be afforded into the first floor bedrooms as they are of those properties. The dual ridge arrangement allows the north facing conservation style roof light as it would be to allow light into that room. I was concerned with previous applications that members might recall about lack of light into what would be the southern elevation, or rooms to the southern elevation of those townhouses, and that's one of the reasons that the previous planning applications were refused and subsequently dismissed on appeal. So this slide shows what would be the northern elevation of the townhouses, and the existing wall with Bluecoat Court is shaded grey to the left-hand side of that. So that gives an indication of the finished height. It would be marginally taller than the car park as it stands at present. So this slide shows the extent of the development, which would be visible from Bluecoat Court, and this is the slide I referenced earlier on in the presentation. The photograph in the bottom right-hand corner and what would potentially be the proposed arrangement extended it further towards the right as you're looking at the slide. Obviously, this application has sought to overcome those concerns and is presented on that basis. So this slide shows the proposed southern elevation which faces Lees's Bow, which would sit behind the existing trees that populate the bankside at present, falls down quite steeply to the highway, and it also shows the position in relation again to Bluecoat Court to the right. So this slide shows the proposed floor plans for the townhouses and the conversion of the existing building which sits to the north of that, which would occupy the apartments. This is a better slide showing the floor plan of the townhouses. Again, the reason for this is the relationship with the trees on that bank side, and also the relationship with Bluecoat Court to what is the east of the application site. So what you can see is at ground floor that the proposals have incorporated WC and utility room to the rear elevation, which are not habitable rooms, and overcomes any conflict there might be with existing trees in terms of restricted light, and then further down the line in the future, residents wanting those trees excessively pruned or removed. And this overcomes that, because those are not habitable rooms, and you've got a kitchen diner across the remaining ground floor, which is afforded natural light by the window in the other elevation that you can see there. To protect to some extent from internal alterations, if members are minded to approve planning and permission, that there is a condition which, going back to obscure glazing, which insists that that obscure glazing is used in that utility room to ensure that at no point in the future do those internal arrangements change. And we've secured that to some extent through that condition. So that's the reason for that. And all of the conditions the applicant has agreed to. So moving on to statutory responses, those are summarised in detail in the committee report, so I'll not go through them in too much detail. Just to note that the Highway Authority raises no objection subject to a condition of the construction management plan be submitted, noting the constrained access, or to some extent the constrained access which serves the site. And Northumberland Water have offered no objection. We have received objection and concern from the City of Durham Parish Council, who are concerned with regards to a number of elements of the proposal, although we have had some discussions with them as we've moved through the application process. But those concerns principally relate to the use of the development in terms of potentially being used as PBSA and HMO, concerns regarding, and those haven't been helped to some extent, given that this is a resubmitted application from previous guises, and some of the supporting information I think has included typos which make reference to student use or solely student use. We've clarified that with the applicant, and it's detailed in the report. It's a use falling into Class C3 of the use classes order, which is a sort of standard residential dwelling family home, if you like. And I think in the report you'll see that any change away from that, which is a material change, would be subject to planning control. So moving on to those other concerns, they relate to accessibility requirements, which again are considered and covered in the report, and proposals for the safe storage and collection of refuse, concerns in relation to highway safety, and concerns regarding disruption during the construction phase. Should members be minded, or should the committee, be minded to approve planning permission. So in terms of internal consultation responses, again, no fundamental objections to what is proposed, and subject to conditions, and those conditions would control external materials, submission and agreement of tree protection measures, contaminated land information, and the implementation of ecological mitigation that's detailed in the supporting information that came in with the application. So one letter of objection was received from Prism Planning, who are planning agent or consultant, and that was on behalf of all residents of Bluecoat Court. They raised concerns regarding the impact of the development upon residential amenity, particularly from overbearing and overshadowing and cited previous applications in doing that, and also a lack of clarity in the application as reason for that. This was raised with the applicant, and additional information was provided, and some of that I've included in the presentation. And as such, those objections have since been withdrawn. So in terms of considerations for planning committee, those are listed on the slide. And so that in terms of principle of development, the application should be considered in relation to policy 6 of the County Durham plan. And that's principal policy which is relevant in assessment of proposals against this policy are detailed in the report. In summary, the site is centrally located and is well connected to shops, services, education and transport facilities as you would expect it to be, and as such it's considered to be capable of accommodating new residential development of the scale that's proposed. It's a previously developed site and will not result in the loss of any valued asset. In addition, it proposes a mix of house types, and whilst concern in relation to student use has been noted, as I've said, the application and the use is solely C3. Any material change in use, as I've said, to either purpose-built student accommodation or a house in multiple occupancy would be subject to further planning control. In relation to residential amenity, the application reflects significant alterations from previous proposals which were refused by committee and subsequently dismissed at appeal. The development has been reduced in mass and height, and adjacent residents, although initially concerned, as I've said, have removed those objections. So the proposal would broadly accord with guidance contained in the Council's residential design guide and associated policies in the County Durham Plan. In terms of future residents, a scheme of noise mitigation is required to be submitted and agreed through planning condition, and that was included on the advice of the Environmental Health Officer who raised no objection. So the site is, I probably should have gone into this in slightly more detail earlier on in the presentation. It is within the conservation area in the World Heritage Site, and I think I pointed out the cathedral in the background of one of the photographs there. Officers consider that the development has been sensitively designed in that regard to respect its position within the conservation area and the setting of the World Heritage Site. And subject to additional controls detailed in conditions described in the committee report, the development is considered to accord with the appropriate policies of the County Durham Plan and also the neighbourhood plan for Durham City as there is now, and also guidance in the MPPF. And the precise policies are listed in the report, and I'll have them up on the final slide. The scheme has also been overcome to avoid potential conflict with adjacent trees, and members will see that the condition which requires a submission and agreement of tree protection measures is included. So in terms of parking access and highway safety, the site was previously used as office accommodation. The car park served that use. And this was gone through on a couple of the previous applications as well. This use could be reintroduced and is unrestricted in terms of vehicle movements. Therefore, there is a fallback position to be considered, and this is noted by the Highway Authority in their response. The site access is narrow, but is nevertheless an existing arrangement which served the previous use, and taking into account that fallback position, it's not considered there will be sufficient grounds to sustain refusal of the application on highway safety grounds, and that was reflected in the Highway Authority's response to the application. We have included a condition which requires a submission agreement of a construction management plan, and that would afford some control in terms of how deliveries would work and access to and from the site during the construction phases, as well as controls over working hours and the like, which we've already discussed to some extent this morning on Lisa's application. So in terms of ecology and other matters, just to go through that very quickly, there's a condition which requires the mitigation that's proposed be implemented, and the Council's ecologist is comfortable with that. So in terms of conclusion, the development is considered to accord with the aims of Policy 6 of the County Durham Plan, which provides support for development of unallocated sites within existing settlements. It would preserve and enhance the character of the conservation of the World Heritage Site and the setting of nearby listed buildings, and by reason of its size, scale, mass layout, could be satisfactory to accommodate in accordance with the policies listed on the slide there, and including an acceptable impact on residential amenity for both future and existing residents who live nearby. So on that basis, Chair, it's presented to Planning Committee with a recommendation for approval. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Paul. A very detailed presentation again there for the committee to consider. We do have a registered speaker on this particular item, and I would like to introduce Councillor John Ashby, who is speaking in objection on behalf of the City of Durham Parish Council. So, Mr. Ashby, I know you are in with the meeting. You joined the meeting earlier on, so I will move over to you now to give your representations.
Thank you very much, Chair and members, and thank you, Paul, for immaculate presentation. As Paul says, the Parish Council here raised a number of concerns about this application, and they arose primarily because of the history of applications that have been made here, each in turn quite rightly refused and, on appeal, have been dismissed. In effect, Chair, your officers, the Planning Inspectorate, and yourselves have had to spend a very significant amount of time and effort considering and refusing a string of deeply unsatisfactory proposals. This fourth is hopefully the last. To be clear, we welcome genuine C3 developments in our area that provide residential accommodation for year-long occupation. This is an ideal location for such development, especially suitable for elderly people because of its proximity to the city centre. The applicant's supporting statements are confusing and contradictory. For example, the transport statement in support of this application says 49 dwellings in paragraph 1.1.3 and 74 dwellings in paragraph 5.1.2. In fact, together with the approved and permitted conversions of existing buildings at William Robson House, the current proposal would add a further 7 two-bedroom dwellings, making a grand total, if approved, of 44 dwellings here. Furthermore, and worse, that transport statement continues to say in paragraph 3.2.8 that it is anticipated that the apartments could prove attractive to students of Durham University. That paragraph was the main concern of the parish council. If this development is as described in the transport statement, it would fail the policies of the County Durham plan. And the planning officer deals with this entirely correctly by pointing out that the applicant would have to apply for planning permission to change from C3 to C4 or sui generis HMOs, or indeed a PBSA. We will stay alert. Our second concern was the essential provision to meet accessibility requirements did not appear to be shown and would therefore need to be specified if approval were to be given. The planning officer proposes condition 4, which meets that point admirably. Our third concern was the arrangements for the collection of wheelie bins. The applicant's design, access and heritage statement says, and I quote, "Provision has been made for internal bin storage. The bins will be moved to Claypath on collection days and collected by private contractors." Claypath is often obstructed by wheelie bins from apartments and restaurants. This matter must be addressed. 44 domestic wheelie bins would totally block pedestrian movement on Claypath every week. And the planning officer informs you that a different arrangement is now proposed, and this is secured by proposed condition 14. Again, we'll be on the case. Fourthly, we were concerned about the consequences of no car parking provision being made. However, this cannot be the basis of a refusal of this application. And finally, we suggested that operational conditions will be needed and enforced to manage the entry and exit of construction and building material lorries. This is covered by proposed condition 5. And on the basis of its concerns, the Parish Planning Committee considered that despite being a much improved design from previous schemes that were refused and lost on appeal or withdrawn, this latest application should be refused on the grounds of being envisaged as student accommodation contrary to policy 16 of the County Durham plan, and also threatening pedestrian and traffic disruption on Claypath. The planning officer's report, published 8 days ago, addresses our concerns and proposed conditions, which makes it possible to accept this development. Given the history here and the contradictory information provided by the applicant, the developer must comply with those conditions, and enforcement action must be taken against any breach of the residential use, such as to become an HMO or PBSA use. And on that basis, the County Council will have wrestled this into an acceptable scheme, and the Parish Council expresses its appreciation to you. Thank you for your courtesy in allowing me to speak this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution to the discussion, Councillor Ashby. Paul, I'm going to quickly come back to you in case there's anything that you would like to add before I go to the committee.
Yeah, no? Nothing from me, Chair. I think it's all covered in.
No, I think Councillor Ashby wound everything up very admirably there. So, committee, over to yourselves this morning. And it looks as though we've got Councillor Davidson wishing to speak.
Thanks, Chair. You never guess what I'm going to say in a minute, but I'd just like to say that that's possibly the most glowing recommendation I've ever heard for a council planning officer since I've been on here. And that's from people who were presenting their schemes as well. So that's I'd like to thank Councillor Ashby for that, and thank Paul for his report. And remember when we were on site last year, and there was a lot of questions about what would happen about the car park, and was it an acceptable scheme, and how would it go about, and everything. And it seems like I don't know how, but Paul sort of squashed them together and got them to answer all of those loose ends that were had. So it looks like a scheme that'll work to me. So I'd like to move approval, but I'd obviously like to move approval with a little change in the time for the construction management plan, because this one says 7:30 as well, and we did stand right next to the gentleman or the lady next door's garage, which really is stuck onto this thing, so they're going to be within like a few meters of it. So I'd like to move that we accept it, but we changed the time to 8 AM for a start, please. Oh, and David Freeman's got his rats, so we haven't missed that today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Taylor, you're next in line, but I suspect I know why Councillor Freeman's raised his hand, so I will go to you first, Councillor Taylor, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Freeman.
Okay, Chair, thank you very much indeed. I just wanted to second Councillor Davidson's recommendation and say yes again. As with the previous work done by officers, what a fantastic report, what a really good report. So 2 excellent reports, thank you so much. And this particular one needed a firm and very well put together suite of conditions to give us all confidence. And I believe that the conditions proposed does that, Paul. So thank you very much for that. I'm quite content, as I say, Chair, to second this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Freeman.
Thanks. My name's Councillor David Freeman. I'm Councillor for Elva and Gilesgate Ward. Firstly, I'd just like to declare that I'm a member of the City of Durham Parish Council. I'm not a member of their planning committee, so I haven't had any input into Councillor Ashby's response this morning. I do, of course, have similar concerns to Councillor Ashby, some of which have undoubtedly have been responded to in the conditions for the application. I'm cynical. I actually do believe that the developers here really would like to end up with students in these properties. The adjacent building, William Robson House, that we're not discussing today, but that undoubtedly will be students. And the very nature of this application being 2-bedroom rather than 3-bedroom implies that the applicants can in some ways get round our own planning policies by putting students into what appear to be C3 properties rather than C4. This is perhaps inappropriate, but I'd like to ask the planning officer what he thinks would happen if this development is approved and constructed, the applicants come straight back and seek to change the classification, because I'm cynical and believe that that is actually the end point at which the applicants wish to be at.
Well, thank you for raising your interest in this application, Councillor Freeman, and I will go back to our planning officer, who I think actually has already answered that question, as has Councillor Ashby, but I will go back to you, Paul, just to clarify. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Chair. No, absolutely. I mean, if they came forward with an alternative proposal which proposed a different use, be that HMO C4 HMO use, then we would assess it against policy 16, I think it is, of the County Durham plan, and have reference to the percentages and balanced communities and the like, and with the adoption of the plan, whereas previously we've been using the interim policy, we have appeal decisions which we can fall back on as well to robustly assess that application without prejudging it at this stage. Obviously, comfortable that we have enough at our disposal to appropriately determine any such application. Really, I hope that answers the question, but possibly not. But that's the position as I see it, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. And it was mentioned about enforcement and planning regulations being looked at as well by Councillor Ashby. Personally, I do know in my I'll just finish if you don't mind.
Yes.
Personally, I do know in my ward we have an absolute need for 2-bedroomed accommodation, and as Councillor Ashby said, in a central location. So I think I would prefer to take the alternative view that we're being provided here with some much needed accommodation. There aren't enough 2-bedroom properties for people who are elderly and do sometimes need people to stay with them. So I would choose to take that point of view. But you wanted to come back in there, Councillor Freeman.
Yes, thank you. Sorry for interrupting. I just wondered, and I suspect there isn't, whether there's anything that we can do in terms of an additional condition that actually stops occupancy by students in these buildings. Thanks.
Well, I will go back to you, Paul, but I think we know the answer, but I'll ask the planning officer to answer.
We couldn't. Any such condition wouldn't meet the appropriate tests. Neil might be.
Yes, Neil's waiting to come in. So Neil, if you can finish off the answer, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's really just to support what the case officers said. We couldn't have a condition that did that. It wouldn't satisfy any of the tests for imposition of a condition. So it's just not possible, I'm afraid.
Right, okay, well, there we go, Councillor Freeman, you've got your answer. Would anybody else on the committee like to offer an opinion, or we have had a mover and a seconder for this application to be approved? If anybody has anything else to say before we go to the vote? No? Right, well, thank you, committee. So, Neil, if we can go over to you for the vote, please.
Okay, so as before, I'll come to each member and ask if you're for or against, and equally if you want to abstain, if you can let me know at that stage. So this is a vote for approval of the application in accordance with the officer's recommendation, subject to an amendment to condition 17, which will change the working hours from a 7:30 start to an 8 AM start. So I'll come to Councillor Brown first.
For approval.
Thank you. Councillor Corrigan.
For approval.
Thank you. Councillor Davidson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Freeman.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Iveson.
For approval.
Thank you. Councillor Jewell.
For approval.
Thank you. Councillor Manchester.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Pounder.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Shuttleworth.
For.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Taylor.
For.
Chair, that's unanimous.
Thank you for that, Neil, and thanks committee for your interest in that item. So application 5B for the apartments at William Robson House, Claypath, have been approved. Thank you. We will move over now on to item 6 of the agenda, such other business, and I haven't been notified of any other business that needs to be discussed this morning. Only that I will reiterate and add my thanks to the planning officers who do a tremendously difficult job. They always have a huge caseload to get through, and they approach every application with the diligence that each one requires. So I do offer my thanks on behalf of the committee to all our planning officers, not just the 2 planning officers who've been present today. And as well, I would like to offer my appreciation and thanks to the committee, who, despite these difficult times that we find ourselves in, we've turned up month after month here. Not everybody is confident as others, but I think we're doing a sterling job. We are doing the best job that we can to our own ability. So thank you, everybody. I wish you all a safe and happy festive season, and I look forward to seeing you all in the new year, our planning committee in January, and we'll await the agenda to see what interesting problems we have to consider then. So thank you very much, everybody.
If I may, if you bear with me, if you be so kind, can I thank you as well on behalf of the committee for the wonderful job you've done, and reiterate what you said about our officers, from committee services to planning officers, highways, everybody. Thank you, Chair. Has been a difficult period. Can I wish you all, as you've just done, a very happy Christmas and a safe and a nice Christmas for all your families. Thank you, Chair, very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. I really do appreciate that. As I mentioned at the very start of the meeting, if you can remember, this meeting is being recorded and sent out, and I would ask the members of the committee to stay with us until we get the nod that we've stopped recording. But everybody else who's here as a guest, well, thank you very much for your attendance, and bye-bye.